Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. In today's episode, I am going to be taking these ordinary Frisbees, they're the toy plastic Frisbees, and turning them into a wall piece. Now before I get into all of that, I actually have with me, these are two original Frisbee pie pans from the Frisbee Pie Company. These are really old and they actually belonged to my grandmother, who was the first female AFL union rep for the Frisbee Pie Company. She was the shop steward. So why am I even bringing any of this up? Well, it is believed that the Frisbee pie tins were what the original Frisbee was made from, and that the tins were thrown around. Once the tins were empty, the kids would throw them around, and thus the Frisbee was invented. Whether or not that's true, 100% I'm not sure, because I also found information on some guy who claimed he also invented the Frisbee. Anyway, I have these Frisbee pie tins because they are authentic. I have been toiling with what to do with them for a very long time. In the back of my head, always knowing I had these and not sure yet what to do with them, led me to this attraction to this Frisbee, which until I figure out what I'm doing with those, I now have these plastic Frisbees. And I thought it would be really cool that since the origin of the Frisbee could possibly be from this pie tin, to turn these into some wall art by putting silhouettes of various types of fruit on them, and it just become an interesting wall feature with a little bit of history thrown in. I found these on clearance for 9 cents. I've seen plastic Frisbees at the 99-cent store, and because these were Easter's, you can see my llama on it with some Easter eggs. These were on clearance for 9 cents, but even if you don't find them on clearance, you probably coming to the end of summer, you might be able to find them super cheap. Even if you ended up paying $1 for each one of them, I'm gonna use 9, so you're looking at like $9 and some contact paper. So it's a pretty cheap way to make a piece. So to get started, I had to remove the sticker. This is probably one of the biggest pains I've had to deal with trying to peel off this sticker. Some Frisbees will come without it. Once I spray paint them, any paper type of item that might be stuck on is going to bubble and want to come off. To remove my sticker, I painstakingly started off with peeling until you can try and get a corner up. And I very slowly peeled back as much as I possibly could without tearing. I mean, there did get to a point where I had no choice. Very slowly wanted to peel back as much as I could. You want to try and get off as much as you can, because the next step was not that easy. It was much easier trying to scrape off what I could. Read some stuff about using a blow dryer to add some heat, and that did help sort of. The idea is that the heat softens the adhesive and then you're able to peel it off a little bit easier. When I peeled the bulk of those off though, it was really hot out, so I think that the temperature helped me out. I removed as much as I possibly could. Now the next move is, if you have goof off or goo gone, this would be the way to go. And you'd want to just spray this on here, let it sit for a few minutes. You will be able to scrape it up with the razor blade. So once I got it sprayed on here, I'm just going to go ahead and spread it out a little bit with my finger. This stuff is supposed to be natural because it's citrus, but you might want to wear gloves if you are sensitive to materials. And I just am looking at my work surface and it's sprayed all over the place. I'm going to wipe that up because this actually has a lacquered finish on it and I don't want that to eat away at that. Now if you don't have goof off, you could just use acetone, or you can try the alcohol method where you just put a little bit of rubbing alcohol on it. The rubbing alcohol requires a little bit more elbow grease, and I found it much easier to start off with the goof off, scrape off that first layer, and then move on to the acetone. It's going to take some doing, but you want to remove as much of the residue as possible so it doesn't interact funky when you go to do your spray painting. Even with the goof off, it will only remove the paper part. Didn't really take up the adhesive, and that's why I needed that acetone. I just have some little pads here. The acetone, you kind of want to let it sit for a second or two, give it a chance to eat away at the adhesive. When you're done with all of that, you want to rinse them with soap and water and then let them fully dry, because the next stage is going to be to spray paint these guys. I decided to go with just a black flat spray paint because I'm using a gold vinyl for my silhouettes of the fruit, and what the black background is going to do is allow the gold vinyl to have a contrasting background and stand out against that black. My Frisbees have completely dried overnight. I'm ready to start applying my vinyl. I have a Cricut and I used it to cut out my fruit shapes on the machine. However, if you don't have a Cricut, you don't need one. You can totally do this completely by hand, and I'm going to show you how to do that by hand first. You will need some kind of vinyl. You could buy contact paper from the 99-cent store if you find a pattern that you really like, or you could just go and buy vinyl that's made for a Cricut or a Silhouette or any one of those craft machines. I have a larger Cricut maker and they did not have the color of the vinyl that I wanted, so I ended up just buying the Cricut Joy size, which is just smaller of a roll, and it still worked fine for me. But I'm gonna just show you how to cut a shape out of this vinyl without the Cricut. To get me going here, I'm gonna just tape this down to make it a little bit easier. And I just have some blue tape. I'm just gonna use my blue tape to get it down on this table. I am not gonna be cutting through my paper. If you look really closely, there's a layer of the vinyl sticky, and then there's a very thick layer of a paper that it's on. And so when I start cutting, I'm not gonna be cutting through this paper. But if you're worried about doing that, maybe you wanna put this on a sewing mat or on some cardboard so that you don't have to worry about accidentally cutting into your surface. I went and printed out a picture of my fruit, and I just have this silhouette of an apple, and you just really want an outline. If you don't want to print something out, you could totally hand draw something on a piece of paper and just cut yourself out a little template. So I'm going to put this down, and I'll just use a piece of this blue tape just to keep it in place while I'm doing the cutting. And I'm just going to use an X-Acto knife or craft knife, whichever you prefer calling it. X-Acto, I guess, is the brand name. Just taking the tip of that knife, you're just going to go in and trace around the edge, cutting through your vinyl. And basically what you're doing here is you're just making a sticker. I don't need to put too much pressure because that paper is really thick underneath it. The cutting vinyl kind of just an adhesive foil. And then I'm just going to take the tip of my X-Acto and check to see if I've sliced through. Yeah, there we go. And I should end up with basically an apple-shaped sticker. And then I can go ahead and apply that onto my Frisbee. Now obviously this is a little bit too small for the Frisbee size that I have, and I'm going to be using the ones that I did cut with the Cricut. I'm going to move on to showing you those, and I'm just going to run some quick footage of me printing out one of the shapes. To start out, I first downloaded some silhouettes that I just did a Google search, found some silhouettes of fruit, and then uploaded those silhouettes directly into my Cricut software, and I was off to send it to the cutter. All right, and here we go with the print. Just gonna click make it. Then I need to go in and select my medium type, which in this case is the vinyl. And then it's over to the Cricut. And I totally did not cut that long enough, so I'm going to have to recut another one. Let me see, they'll miss that bottom tip. So here we go, is my giant apple print. And my Frisbees I spray painted with a matte black because I wanted to have, you know, that flat surface. And honestly, it was the cheapest black paint I have. It was like $1 for the spray can. And I'm going to be applying a top coat that will give it a slight sheen, which I'll get to in a moment. But I wanted to make sure that that fully dried. When I applied some shapes that had a little bit more of an intricate design, it became really tricky, the typical Cricut method, which would be to print out your vinyl, use your transfer tape, which if If you have a Cricut, you know what I'm talking about. That process does not work for this because I chose to pre-paint my Frisbee. That transfer tape tore up the paint color, so I had to actually retry this one several times in order to get it to work, until I realized that I really didn't need the transfer tape to begin with to apply the vinyl. I could just peel it off like a sticker and smack it onto the Frisbee and I'm good to go. So it was just an added step that was not necessary, and you're not going to need to worry about that if you're not using a Cricut anyway. I did want to point out that because I really was hell-bent on having this cocoa bean, it was much more complex than something like my apple, and getting this design on here is maybe not the best of things. I probably should have abandoned the cocoa bean and stuck with something that was a little bit simpler. So just want to keep that in mind. If you do end up going with a Frisbee that is already maybe black or a solid color that you didn't need to spray paint, then by all means you can do much more intricate designs and use the transfer tape as you normally would. That being said, let's move on. So this is really simple. All I'm going to do is peel it off now at this point, and I will have a giant sticker. Figure out what looks like it's centered. You don't want to pick this up several times. As soon as you get it positioned, you're going to have to leave it in place. There's not too much room for error here, which is how I ended up with those problems. I'm just using my little scraper thingy here. I don't even know what this is called. It probably has a technical term. You don't have to have one of these. You could use a credit card, an old library card, gym membership card, whatever you have. Burnish it on, working out the air bubbles. Try to avoid scraping the paint part. I'm just going over the sticker part of this. Alrighty. And so now I'm going to be top coating it. It's just a matte clear enamel, and it'll just put a protective coat over this. I'm just going to put a very thin coat on it around the entire thing, including the sides as well as the vinyl piece, and then it'll be good to go. I'm going to continue putting on these other last couple ones. Now in the case of something like this with this really intricate berry, and I'm not sure you could even see that on there because it's a very fine cut, it has these little tiny negative space swoops. In this case, instead of peeling off the whole thing in one go, I'm going to remove the background first so that all I have left on this piece of paper is my berry, because it's going to make it a lot easier when I go to deal with the transfer. Now I have to get in here, and as I remove them, you'll be able to see them better. This is just the tip of that tool that they sell, and there was like a Cricut tool pack, but you probably could get away with using the tip of a pair of tweezers. Toothpick, I'm sure would work just fine. A safety pin. Okay, here we go. Just gonna peel it off. This time I'm gonna have to be a little bit more careful because of those negative spaces. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of peel on an angle. Everybody who owns a Cricut right now is probably cringing, going, what the hell is she doing? This is not the right way. I'm telling you, gotta do it this way, because otherwise you'll pull up all of that paint. And maybe people don't have one. Maybe they're just gonna use the contact paper from the 99-cent store and make this a really cheap project, which is totally awesome. If you do, definitely post pictures in the comments, because I wanna see it. And on that note, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe, because I really am trying to get my numbers up so I can continue on. One more. Pear. Everybody's like, what kind of pear pie is that? I'm thinking more like, a tart. Pear tart could be in a tin. Besides, the pear is underrated. Pears are used a lot as the filler when making other fruit pies. Bet you didn't know that, huh? Like a berry pie, you add pear to it to kind of fill it out and add some extra sweetness. It cuts the tartness of your berries. Alright, now I'm gonna go give them that dusting of spray, and then as soon as they'll dry, I'm gonna go ahead and get them installed on the wall so we can see what it looks like. All right, you guys, here it is installed on the wall. Looks pretty awesome. My fruit-inspired Frisbee wall art. That's all I have for you today. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already. And thanks for joining me. Hope to see you soon. What you doing? Where you going? Oh, okay. Looks like a crown, even though it's the leaves. Oh, I have smiley faces stuck to me.